Hey, everybody. Hello. I am Wendy Howard. I'm the Executive Director of One Montgomery Green, and I am so pleased that you can all join us for the first of 2022's Eco Evenings with DEP and OMG. I think most of you guys know this is a town hall series created by our friends at DEP and ourselves to really provide information to our community on different green initiatives that are going on. And I'm very excited for this first one and our guest speakers that we have. A couple of logistics for you guys. This event is being recorded. So a good thing for those of you who signed up and couldn't attend is you will get a link to this after the meeting, if not this evening, tomorrow morning. We do have a large number of attendees, so I please ask that you mute yourself while the presentations are going on. We are going to allow for a Q&A after each presentation, so please hold it off. But I have my team, Brenda and Tia, who are watching the chat box, and we'll do our best to try and answer every question. If we cannot, please make sure that you include contact information. If there's a question that David or Rezwan cannot get to during this session, I promised I will share with them your questions and have them reach out. This event is also being live streamed on Facebook. For those of us, if you want to make sure that you're not visible, you can keep your, but you guys are all beautiful. Please keep your video on so we can see you. Let's see, there will be an opportunity for audience questions. Please be kind. And we will call on you for your questions. So if you want to ask your own question, we will do our best to let you do that as well. All right. So as I said, tonight we have an exciting lineup. The focus of this, our first Eco Evenings, is really on some neighborhood initiatives. Some of our friends had mentioned from the MoCo Cap Coalition, some friends from DEP were really interested to hear what David, who has been doing quite a lot of things, had to say about Cool Block and the Cool City Challenge. So I'm excited for him to attend. And then another friend recommended Rezwan, who has a real, I'd like to say, insight on how we sort of reach our goals together. So I think we have a great evening packed for you. And I am going to, as I said, please give the speakers the opportunity to talk, and then afterwards we can open up for questions. So we're going to start with David. He's got a great presentation for us. After that, it will be Rezwan. So, but we will allow for questions for David after he speaks. So David, I am going to make you the key. We're going to pull ourselves to the side. You can share your screen if you want. So I am pleased to present David Gershon of, I guess it's still Empowerment Institute, right? Is your start. So I'm not supposed to tell you you're muted because you knew. It's all up to you.
Yes. Ready to go? Okay. Well, hello, everybody. And delighted to have a chance to share what we're doing with you all. And I love that the theme is neighborhood initiatives. And Wendy, you are a force of nature. So bless you for all the good work that you do and getting me here. And I want to shout out to Philip, who's been kind of helping drive this to get this happening. So yay, Philip, for thank you for your patience with my my schedule. So I'm going to share my slides with you and my screen and then my slides and talk about a big idea. Can you all see my slides? Okay. So the big idea is what we call a climate moonshot scaling strategy. Climate moonshot being creating carbon neutral cities by 2030, which is a lot faster than anyone is thinking is possible currently, which is why we call it a moonshot. So as I go through this, I'll be inviting you to wear two hats. One, your theory of change and what's possible. So expanding your mind perhaps about how change can actually happen at this level and this pace. And then two, really helping think deeply about how this might be relevant to what you are doing in whatever sphere of influence you have. Okay, with that said, Let me begin. So as I've defined the climate challenge, as we've defined the climate challenge in our Empowerment Institute, what we've concluded is that we have a time issue. We know we have a climate problem, but we have even more than that, a time issue. We have 10 years and counting to achieve rapid carbon reduction, to avoid hitting irreversible ecological tipping points that threaten human viability on Earth. So anyone who's on this Zoom will likely know about the issue. And the question is, can we speed up time? Can we produce results a lot faster than anyone currently is on track to do that? I believe the answer is yes, and I'll share with you how I see it, how I see that happening. So the first question then is, okay, where do you get the most carbon reduction in the shortest period of time? And some of you may know this, some of you may not, but that cities are the natural starting point because 70% of our carbon emissions on the planet come out of cities, and we have the available solutions to achieve carbon neutrality. We have everything we need, and we know where to focus. A lesser known fact is that 70% of that footprint comes out of our behaviors as citizens of those communities, as residents of those communities. So we are the problem and the solution, and we have the potential to be a significant player as opposed to sitting on the sideline where many of us often feel in the climate conversation. So what solutions can create carbon neutral cities without offsets in 10 years? And the operative term for us is without offsets. With offsets, it's really just playing a bit of a mathematics game. You know, let's get as much as we can and then we'll offset the rest. So we wish to go all the way without offsets, which places the bar a lot higher. So what we see as we examine the climate space is that there's three top-down solutions that most people are familiar with, because most people think top-down, and they are important, but they're not sufficient. And that is creating climate policies, new technologies, and building new markets for these technologies. And they are not getting the job done by themselves. And so a lot of frustration. What are we going to do if these solutions are not able to get the kind of change we want at the time frame we need them? And then there's another type of solution, we call them bottom up, which is behavioral change centric, an area that we spent a lot of time in over the last basically 30 years. Also important, but not sufficient. So now we see four siloed solution sets. And the first thing that we're doing that's going to start looking at how we change the game around speed, magnitude, and quality of change is the notion of combining top-down and bottom-up to enable a carbon neutral city by 2030. What if you brought all four of these solutions together into a whole system climate solution? When you do that, you discover something very interesting, that the demand side drives the supply side. Behavioral change creates demand for the policies, for the technologies, and the people who will take advantage of a new market. So we as individuals can activate the whole system rather than being on the sideline waiting for something to happen from government or some technological breakthrough miraculously happening, or some new market being created. We can actually drive that. So then we are very central to how. We are now in the game. So how do we empower citizens of these communities to change their behavior? So enter this Cool Block program that Wendy teed up earlier. Let me talk to you about our Cool Block program. So we've been at this some 40 years with our Empowerment Institute and 30 years explicitly in the climate space. And we've built up a lot of knowledge on how to create what's called second order change or transformative social change, how to empower people with the agency to act on their good intention, how to design whole system solutions in communities and around the world. And it's all built around an idea that the term is well known, the how-to is lesser well known, of empowerment, enabling people to envision and create what they want in their lives and their world. which is the heart of our work over the last many decades. So let me talk a little bit about the Cool Block program. So a block leader, someone says, yes, you live on a block or in a building, so you have the potential to be a block leader. I want to do this. You gather 5 to 8 neighbors. You then, and there's a lot of support to enable that. You meet 9 times over 4.5 months through these 5 topics: disaster resilience, carbon reduction, water stewardship, neighborhood livability, which is about neighborhood health, safety, beautification, greening, and empowering others. And there are 120 action recipes that we have built out over these 3 decades in these different topics. So like a cookbook, tells you exactly how to do it as opposed to a checklist. You have a peer support system that creates the motivation to follow through what you set out to do and creates a little pressure to make sure that you do it so that you can show up in these meetings and feel good. There are self-directed meeting guides that enable you to do this on your own as a team. Different topics are led by different team members. There's a volunteer coach that shows up, particularly when we have this in a community. Without a community, there's not an availability yet until there are more teams established. There's a mobile web platform that you use to take the actions. And then when we are in a community, they get integrated into local resources from the different city agencies and local nonprofits. So that's the program, how it works. So a question that is very profound around all this is, okay, you have a good program, maybe you have a good program, to be determined, we'll tell you more, you can make your own judgment. But how do you get people to do this? How will you get people who are living busy lives to spend time to do something like this? And what we found over the course of time is that the key to this is what's called intrinsic motivators, not extrinsic. They do it for some intrinsic reason. And the 3 reasons we found is people want to experience greater meaning in their life. I want to create a better world for my children is basically the heart of what is motivating many people. They want to get to know their neighbors. They want to feel a sense of community. I live on this block or in this building, but I don't know my neighbors. That's not a good thing for my quality of life. It's kind of an embarrassment, but we don't know how to do that. An agency, I want to make a difference. Can I really make a difference? So that's why people join. And here's the results that we've gotten from the pilot of the Cool Block. Know that we have done, by this time, millions of teams, millions of people on thousands of teams, but this specific application of Cool Block, this is the results we've gotten. So let me start from the bottom. 45% of the people invited by their neighbors to go to an information meeting in their home end up joining this program over 9 meetings, 4.5 months. So it's a 45% recruitment rate, which is quite remarkable based on the reasons that I've shared and the quality of the program. When they join and participate in these 9 meetings, they take approximately 25 distinct actions, and they reduce their footprint on average by 29% per household. We've worked with a little over 2,000 people. We've done this on 125 Cool Blocks, and we've done it in California, which is our focus at the moment, albeit we'll be expanding this year, which is why it's timely that we're doing this in Maryland, having this conversation in Maryland. But we've worked in Palo Alto, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Mountain View, and Isla Vista. Those are the cities we've done this piloting in. So check a program that can produce substantive carbon reduction, can engage people on their block. We still have to come back to time. If we had a lot of time, that would be one thing, but we don't. So how do we speed up time? How do we change fast enough to create carbon neutral cities by 2030? There are only 5 cities in America with that goal right now. 4 of them are working with us. So this is not a thing that has happened yet, and we need to make it happen. So I want to talk about tipping points, the science of tipping points. This is part of our knowledge base in what we call second order change or transformative social change. I want to share 3 different tipping point strategies that are integrated into our Cool City Challenge strategy. So the first one some of you may know about, it's called Diffusion of Innovation. It grows out of a body of research by Everett Rogers out of Stanford, studying 1,500 case studies on how new ideas spread through a culture, be they technologies or social innovations or whatever. People in Silicon Valley know this quite well because they use this for technological innovation, diffusion. And what Everett Rogers discovered is that there are these different groups of people that respond to an innovation. In this case, a cool block in a cool city, in a carbon neutral city. And they're the innovators who bring an idea forward. And then the early adopters, they are the ones who have a predisposition to have experimentation as part of their mindset. They seek out the new and they have a high tolerance for experimentation. If you get to about 15%, you hit a tipping point where the innovation, if it's capable of diffusing, most are not well developed enough, but if it is, it starts diffusing on its own momentum to the early majority, who are the ones who are the belongers. Eventually the late majority get pulled along, and then the laggards will never participate. So the secret sauce in the diffusion of innovation is preach to the choir. The choir will sing loud enough to get everyone to the church. So that's the first tipping point. And we work with early adopter cities, early adopter neighborhoods, early adopter block leaders, and early adopter states and countries. The second one is what we call, or what is often called, cyclogenesis, which is the study of how hurricanes form. It has been because what happens is that those small vortices and vortexes combine into a hurricane strength. And so this is what happens when many, many blocks come together in a neighborhood context. So that's the second part of the strategy for tipping points. And the third is what's called punctuated equilibrium, which is a mouthful. And this is the study of evolutionary biology on how stable systems transform rather rapidly when you have punctuated equilibrium, if you will, or when you have something that is a catalytic moment. And what enables punctuated equilibrium to happen is what's called an extinction level threat, which we are now facing. And we have now found ourselves in the climate space with this phenomena happening. We have hit a tipping point, and we are now watching us adjust to this and move to a new state. We have not moved. We're in that gyration phase before the new state. We're trying to build these new states in different cities that are early adopters. But what happens that enables that new state to be generated is the release of intelligence, creativity, and will. So these are the kind of qualities that are needing to be activated in communities to get to new places, because we can't do it with more of the same. And part of what we hope will happen through this process is that we can speed up time by 3x across our cities, our states, and our countries. So that's the tipping point science, if you will, that we're working with. Let me now speak a little bit about making this happen. So we have some track records, not exactly at the same level of transforming a planet, but we've certainly seen this happen in the context of moonshots. We've seen it happen in the context of a war. So let me talk a little bit about the process of scaling cool blocks. So a single block starts. Someone says yes. And you'll start to see on the left what we call climate action capacity barometer. So it isn't just that a block is starting this process. We are starting to build climate action capacity with a block leader, with the team members on the block. And as they move through this process, they start expanding and saying, well, what would it look like if we had a cool neighborhood? What could we do with that at that level of scale? How would microgrids work? What would a carbon neutral transportation system look? And then you move to the next level, which we call cool districts. So each level up, once you've done your, I guess in gaming, they call it leveling up. Once you've done your basics, you then have the capacity to move to the next level. And so you're building capacity literally from the ground up. And you move to a climate, what we call a cool district, where you can now do amazing things around things like resilient food systems, and you can start building out new economic models. It goes on at each level of skill, but keep in mind that we're building this carbon literacy and invested leadership and a tremendous amount of people who are now engaged. We move that up to the city level, and we start to have what we call a cool city, which we're defining as the minimum threshold is 400 cool blocks, which is about 10,000 people. And now you have a vanguard. Can you imagine 10,000 people or 10% of that showing up in a city council meeting saying, I've done it already, please help me go further? It's a very different kind of advocacy than cities have ever seen before. And they're not the likely suspects. So you start building capacity for transformation from the top down, not just from the bottom up, but using the bottom up. And then you move to a cool region. Now we're talking Montgomery County or some other larger region. Where you can start having even more power because you've got multiple cities involved. And then you move to a cool state. So imagine, cool Maryland or whatever state you might be from. So that's that process for how you move up the ladder from a cool block, an individual, all the way up to a cool state and beyond. So let me now focus this in a specific part of the carbon footprint of a city, which is the transportation footprint, which is generally, at least for most cities, 60% or more of the footprint. And it's a big piece of the puzzle and the most hard to get your arms around. So people go through cool block and they start walking more and biking more and sharing rides and using public transit and switching to e-bikes and electric cars. And this is creating demand for new top-down policy, technology, and market solutions. So now there's more sidewalks for walking, car-free zones, bike lanes, charging stations. So the top-down is being activated from the bottom up, from a policy point of view and a technology point of view. And now new transit options are being put forward, which is now creating demand for bolder policies and the willingness of city governments to provide more robust funding. And these top-down investments are now driving more behavioral change, activating a virtuous spiral. And it goes on. But now what starts to happen is because you're having higher levels of scale, that you have more room for doing other things than having cars for parking. So more space for housing, parks, public spaces, higher density, walkability. People are able to walk more, bike more, improve their health. And you begin to see something quite profound occur, which is that you're starting to activate a whole system within the community. So this whole system climate solution activates the fullness of the system, or can, within a community, because all these systems are interconnected. And one of the challenges that we are addressing is the disconnection between the different climate solutions, the different issues that people are working on, the different parts of the community, and so on. So now there's more demand for greener jobs and more demand for food systems, and people are healthier and they're using land differently, and there's greater resilience, and buildings are now showing up with greater density. It goes on. So how does this translate into a carbon neutral city? So again, using this notion of whole system oriented design, which is again one of the key principles here, we need to bring 4 different parts of the change processes together. So there needs to be a technology team creating a carbon neutral city, a policy team, a finance team, a community engagement team, and then someone facilitating the synergy of all of that so that we can get the collective intelligence activated of this community. Something else is happening through all this. There's a greater level of trust, community cohesion, and what we call second order change leadership capacity. All of those things are starting to get activated. And from an empowerment point of view, we are also activating these 4 qualities. The power of a vision, a carbon neutral city by 2030, an idea whose time has come. An engaged community, a whole system. There's a whole set of dimensions that are creating a pull in the system. Innovation driven by necessity. We get this together or we face an extinction level threat. So we better learn. Business as usual is no longer acceptable. An idea whose time has come. Now that has 2 ideas, I think, whose time has come. One is a carbon neutral city by 2030. Another is a belief in ourselves, in our future, as opposed to we're doomed and or we're effed, which is the general thing that most people who are under 30 describe as our future. I don't know people over 30 are saying it as much, but I know I'm working with a lot of young people, that is their definition of the future. Therefore, what am I going to do? My future is gone. That is not the idea whose time has come. The idea whose time has come is we can do this. And here's how. And lastly, a catalyst for bottom-up behavioral change, which is the individual makes a difference. We can do this. This is no longer something that is out of my control. We can make it happen. Which brings us into the Moonshot Beliefs. So audacity. This is an audacious idea. We're saying we can speed up time by 30 years. We're saying the current trajectory is not acceptable and it is possible to change it. That is an audacious idea. We're bringing $1 million, by the way, to cities that go on the school city journey. I'll say more about that later. We're not giving them a $10,000 grant. And then we're going to bring the resources to help those cities actually change out their infrastructure. This is a lot of abundance. There's a lot of resources. We have to put them into play. Agency. I am, I can, we are, we can. Absolutely, we can do this. We're building a sense of agency in humanity, not just in a household or a neighborhood or a city or a country. And alchemy. Alchemy really is where the magic is, because we bring all these disparate, disconnected ideas, systems, people living on a block, people living in neighborhoods together. And everyone wants it. They just haven't known how and how to make sense of it. We've decided to work in California because it's an early adopter state. And so we've embarked on this journey to see if we can build this capacity in that state. It has a lot of demand because of the climate disruptions, fires, droughts, you name it. Deep ethos of environmental commitment. There's a lot of political will, and we have a lot of commitment from top leadership in that state, from the governor, among others. There's cities that are already saying yes to carbon neutrality by 2030. There's money. There's a lot of know-how, and there is already the most ambitious carbon neutrality goal for any state in the country. Actually, any country in the world, if you call California a 40 million person state, which is 5th largest economy, a country. So what does the scaling mechanism look like for carbon neutral cities across California and then beyond? So last year, last year, we're now into this new year, we launched the Cool City Challenge on June 1st. 40 California cities went through a rigorous months-long application process. The winning cities ended up being Los Angeles, Irvine, and Petaluma. So large, medium, and small cities, if you will. We awarded $1 million to each of them, plus the equivalent of our consulting support over a 5-year time frame. And we built a joint venture partnership with them to produce this outcome. Each city council was requested and acceded to this request to create a carbon neutral city resolution without offsets. Think about what that means in Los Angeles, the boldest in the world. So cities that are creating carbon neutral goals for 2040, 2035, 2050 with offsets, the game has changed for those cities and empowered residents and activists can start to invite them to think in a little more bold way than how they may have thought in the past if they're not already thinking this way. And each city had to recruit a minimum of 200 cool block leaders. One city recruited over 300 just to apply. And they had to get 25 partner organizations that were multi-sector, so public, private, and civic together. We are launching in June of 2022, this year, the next phase. We look to, if there's enough demand, we will see if there is enough demand. This is a very rigorous, demanding application. We're looking to award $1 million to 25 more California cities so we could scale California, and 25 cities across America, plus our consulting. We're building what we call a Cool City Challenge Innovation Fund to support climate moonshot breakthroughs in these cities. Then in the following years, phases 3 and 4, we look to launch 100 more cities in 2023, 100 more in 2024, 25 of them in California, 75 across America, 100 worldwide. And each of these 250 cool cities will serve as teaching cities to diffuse this climate moonshot knowledge and experience to 10 more cities, which represent 2,500 total worldwide. There are 10,000 cities over 50,000 population. So we are already at the tipping point in the next few years of really reaching all the major cities on the planet, if this goes as planned. This is our vision. We want to see carbon neutral California cities at scale by 2030, across America and the planet by 2030. We want to see California activated by these carbon neutral cities become the first large population size, population body to become carbon neutral. And we want to see if we can get to carbon neutrality as a planet-wide achievement by 2040. So speeding up the entire trajectory for carbon neutrality across the planet, not 2050, but 2040, and carbon neutral. So that's the ambition level we are going after. It is a moonshot. It is audacious. Let me end with this quote from the poet Rilke. He says, "Again and again in history, some people wake up. They move to broader, deeper laws. They carry strange customs with them and demand room for a bold and audacious action. The future speaks ruthlessly through them. They change the world." So, my friends, that's the ambition we're going after. So I don't know how much time I have for questions, but
you did very well, and we definitely have time for questions.
Okay.
I see a couple already. Do we want to start? Jim, did you want to ask your question? You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure, be happy to. Hi, I'm Jim Lawrenson, and have been active in the county for a long time. Currently sort of co-chair of the Cedar Lane Ecosystem Study Group. And our latest reading actually has to do with kind of magical thinking. So I apologize if I come across as too harsh here, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that carbon reduction goals are just empty promises, and that your vision would work only for issues or needs within kind of conventional societal systems that have had the benefit of cheap energy for 150 years within this incredibly failed paradigm of infinite consumption growth in a finite world. And that we're increasingly no longer in that world whereby only massive and immediate degrowth and simplification will address our predicament. So just, again, for the sake of argument. And so how could we truly reach a tipping point for what by most living standards today would appear to be a much, much harder and uncomfortable life?
Well, it is a good question because it does demand a rapid transformation, but it doesn't mean a diminishment of our quality of life by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we are going to be, I think, through the solar revolution and through the way we will be transforming our transportation system, having a lot of new energy capability that we haven't seen before. How do you change consumption practices is a different story. I don't have the answers to that, but I do know that what tends to happen when people go through the cool block experience is that they start looking at how they value material things differently. They look to increase the quality of their life in ways that are not necessarily material. So the need for consumption is reduced. I think the younger people have already gotten to that place. So it's mostly people over 40 who have to change their worldviews about material things, in my experience. And again, you know, an extinction level threat is not something you want to waste. An extinction level threat demands that we get smart, faster about how we've done things in the past. And if you don't go forward towards the possible, then of course we get stuck in just spinning our wheels and lamenting how bad things can be. So I am an optimist, but I'm also a believer in people, and I'm also a believer in how to make change happen in smarter ways than we currently have seen happen. But doing more of the same will get us more of the same results. So that's how I would hold the question. Thank you.
And we have another Jim Schulman. Did you want to ask your question, Jim? And thank you, Jim Lawrenson, for that question and David's thoughtful answer.
Yes, I'll try to summarize. David, I love the vision you've shared. I think it's beautiful. I am skeptical about the call for increased density, however, as going to get us where we want to go. And even though I'm an architect, I see urbanized areas where density is increasing, losing their quality of life, losing their ecological supports, their green infrastructure, if you will. Parkland is disappearing, tree canopies is disappearing. So is increasing density really where we ought to go?
Well, let's just say I believe density can be done with high quality of life, but that is not necessarily part of the solution explicitly. There will be increased density because, you know, you can have high quality life cities that have density. It's tougher in more suburban areas where there's a pull up the bridge mentality is how it's been. I don't want to change that mentality. I've watched that happen in California a lot, and those communities are tougher to get change to happen in. But I'm watching that get transformed. Again, California is usually 10 years ahead if you want to see where the future will be. So I'm watching what happens there. And I'm seeing that density is now getting its due. But again, density is only a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole story. The whole story is we need new energy systems. We need to start thinking decentralization, distributed energy. I mean, I won't even get into all the technicalities because, I mean, again, we're working with 3 different cities and they're approaching it very differently. Petaluma, it's not a density issue per se. LA already has a lot of density. Irvine is a planned community, so each will have to address it differently. The bottom line is creating a moonshot climate action plan is going to need to be an individual exercise of each city. And one thing that we are looking at as a way to do that, as part of our $1 million, the first 500,000 will go into staffing, but the second 500 million will go into creating a model carbon neutral neighborhood. And a model carbon neutral neighborhood that can be replicated citywide. And if 70% of the carbon footprint of a city is the residential sector, then you can begin to start seeing what scaling a carbon neutral city looks like by virtue of getting a neighborhood as a model. So again, a lot more details, but some of the bigger picture ideas.
Good question. So Bonnie and then Doug. So Bonnie, you had a quickly, and thank you, Rezwan, for some good answers in the chat. Bonnie,
Yes,
did you want to ask yours?
Sure. Hi, David. Thank you so much for that very inspiring and positive, optimistic outlook. It's refreshing. So my question is, I do a lot of work in Baltimore City, and it is, you know, so many people have left the city. There's so many vacant properties. So how would a city like Baltimore participate or be part of something like this, do you think?
Well, a good question. I don't know Baltimore very well. I think it starts with progressive political leadership. I mean, that's where it starts, because ultimately you can't get it done just by citizenry. You have to have a committed political leadership at the city council and mayoral level to get real traction. Why would they want to do this in Baltimore is a question. I mean, minimally, if you start to look at some of the issues going on in major cities, one way in is the climate issue. Another way in is disaster resiliency and all the different kinds of diminished quality of life. I mean, when you improve a cool block, we haven't quite priced it out, but a cool block value proposition is probably worth several $1,000s at least in terms of the upgrading property taxes. I mean, property values going up because of people now wanting to live on those blocks. Blighted communities, blighted neighborhoods can begin to improve themselves. We do a lot of work in inner city Philadelphia. People want to stay in the community because they've now increased their quality of life. There's a lot of ways to approach it. I mean, the organizing principle for our work is climate, but the other benefits of this are far transcendent of climate. It deals with improvement of quality of life. I mean, it deals with increased desire for people to stay in a community and not want to leave because their quality of life is improved. It deals with getting to know your neighbors and increasing your own sense of social capital and well-being. And it deals with the basics of energy efficiencies, transportation efficiencies. But the bottom line to get it in a place like Baltimore would be enlightened leadership, which starts with enlightened people who say, I want this in Baltimore. Whether Baltimore is an early adopter for something like this, I don't know. I do think Montgomery County has potential based on what my conversation with Wendy told me. So it has to start somewhere, and hopefully Maryland can help lead the way. It has a reputation of being a progressive place for ideas to spread and start from. Some thoughts.
Perfect.
If someone's interested, they can reach out to me and we can have a deeper conversation.
That's good. Perfect segue to our friends at DEP. Doug, you had a couple of questions from a government perspective.
Yes, thanks. I really appreciate your passion and vision. Montgomery County is incredibly diverse, and so my question. Well, I have multiple questions. One of them is, how flexible is Cool Block? I mean, does it allow jurisdictions and community-based organizations to create culturally relevant actions and processes to create this sense of ownership and buy-in? You know, we co-created this, or is it pretty rigid in that sense? And similarly, how can the county integrate its resources and initiatives and incentive programs into Cool Block? Yeah, and what's the cost? And could you please speak to the training of community block leaders? That's a lot. I have another question too. Like, what's the mix? Like, do you have successful programs where it's a city or a county working in partnership with a CBO or multiple CBOs, neighborhood associations? Thanks. Sorry.
Sounds like you come from government. Yes, I'm very used to these types of questions. Firstly, what's the price and the cost? Well, let me be very clear. At this point, Cool Block is available as an online resource. We are not necessarily selling our services because we're doing the Cool City Challenge, although we can consider that, but it's not per se what we're doing. We're trying to scale up carbon neutral cities as such. So Cool Block is a generic resource that it's $20 per person. If they want to join, a block leader can just do this. A county government can help facilitate that, can help underwrite those costs, and we can talk about how this could work just at the Cool Block level. 120 actions grew out of conversations over many, many years with many, many cities, so they tend to be quite effective in meeting most of the needs. Occasionally, there's an action that's not listed among them, and we're always happy to create new ones if it can be generically useful to many people. So that's a piece. If there was to be a relationship with the work that you're doing, one of the scenarios might be that we start to look at, how to get you guys primed for a Cool City Challenge application through Cool Neighborhoods, where we might invest $1 million in the right cities, way beyond a cool block, because we're not in the service provision business. We're actually a funder, and we are providing capacity building. But that's just not to say that we couldn't do some service provision if that was a starting point. Some of what that looks like are building cool neighborhood pods, 5 to 10 blocks in a city that might want to apply, or just in general. I mean, you could do cool block at large across the county. But if this was of interest, we can have a conversation and try to figure out how this could be helpful to you. The big picture, though, is cool block is a tool. The Cool City Challenge is really about carbon neutral cities. That's really our organizing principle, not just how to develop a tool to help blocks, albeit that's important, and that's more of a service that we have available, but the end game is carbon neutral cities by 2030. So reach out if this is of interest. Happy to have another chat.
Did you have one more question, Doug, before I go to Susan, who I think has a great one there, or do you think that was good? All right, Susan, did you want to ask yours, your question? Oh, there you go.
Me?
Yeah, it was you.
Let's see. I was interested in how Cool Blocks addresses equity issues, such as underserved populations that might have varying needs, like universal health care, a living wage, free mass transit, affordable housing, and other focal points that relate to some of the topics that your program covers. But does the program really dig into that? That's one question. And the second question is, some people who are working 2 jobs and, because we don't have a livable wage, but are concerned about this, might not have the time to be able to devote to it. And how can your program be scaled to a level where it's meeting the needs of those populations?
So let me say, Cool Block is not going to serve every problem, address every problem that we have. So let me be very clear what it is and what it isn't. It's a block-based or building-based program to improve the quality of life and help reduce the carbon footprint and increase the disaster resiliency of a block or a building. It serves the quality of life improvement in many ways. So some of the issues you've teed up may be addressed through that, but it's not what it's designed to do. What it can eventually do, if enough people do Cool Block, is build advocacy for some of those issues from the bottom up. So it has an advocacy building capability. As far as equity is concerned, that's a big part of what motivates us. And in all the cities we work with, it's very central to figure out how to optimize the equity component of this. But basically, what many people are finding is because this is so on the ground, and we move equity from this conceptual thing or theoretical thing or political hot potato or thing that's only showing up at policy conversations to actually improving the quality of life for the people who are in some of those challenging environments on the ground. And so they're beginning to see Cool Block is actually addressing many of those needs because we are being able to help them in those places where there are greatest needs. They do need extra support often because they are often stretched for time. But when we've seen it get put on the ground, it so increases the issues that they care about, people in those kinds of environments, that they are very happy, and they often become the most active users of Cool Block because they perceive the value. For example, we've seen a version of this program take place at North Philly in the inner city parts of Philadelphia, and it was taken up. We were getting 90% take up on the block. It was perceived as that much value because they had all these things getting thrown at them as programs, but they really didn't have anything that really worked. So a lot of opportunity. It takes care and thought, and it requires the city to really be well integrated, the city government to be well integrated into that. But when those things are there, it can be quite helpful, I think.
That was wonderful. And we are running out of time. Thank you, David. That was really good. I know a couple other questions for you. We're still in the chat and we'll do our best to get those to you so you can answer. But I don't want us to miss out on what Rezwan has to speak to us about. So I'm going to shift over. I'm going to replace the pin. David, we're going to make you a little smaller. But we appreciate your staying on with this. I'd like to introduce Rezwan Razani with Footprint to Wings. Okay, I almost got it out that way. Thanks for joining us. And you should be able to share your screen.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Wendy, for having me. I'm really honored to be here. Very excited. I'm really excited, actually. And so many people are here. This is great. That we all want to get to zero carbon. That's very powerful. Thank you, David, for a fantastic presentation. I think I understand a little bit more of what you're doing, and it's very inspiring. So I love your ambition. I love especially it's without offsets. You're like the time thing and the without. So many people are just like, well, let's do a few % a year. Or what small thing can I do? But you really want to see it through. And I feel that I'm hoping everybody else here also wants to accelerate that and that we all share that goal because that's powerful. Okay, so now the thing is, I shall start my share. What I also liked is the metaphors. You've got the moonshot and there was even some, like going to war, preparing to war. And our metaphor is more the national pastime. So it's kind of a sports thing. And so how you had the 120 action recipes. So and that's a cookbook, and we'd be more like it's a playbook. That's our difference. But okay, so let me get started here. Okay. All right. So footprint to wings. This talk is mindset metrics to get to zero carbon to scale. So we get those solutions from the town level, and we want to go all the way to state. So our thing is like you really need some good metrics. Hello, I'm Rezwan Razani. This is me. That's a picture. I'm a writer. I'm a game designer. I founded Footprint to Wings. I have a BA from UC Berkeley. I went to Cornell. Yeah, you go. Bears, big red. Okay, and I'm writing a playbook. Now, the way I see everybody else is you're also like you've got a playbook that you like. There's the drawdown. Some people are big fans of drawdown. That's the drawdown playbook. Like everybody's got their own playbook, and everybody should, because even in any sport, everybody's got a playbook, but you have your own specific playbook and you develop your own like recipes of plays that suit you and your playbook. So that's the metaphor we're going with. Now, footprint to wings. It's like you want your footprint, but you don't want to get rid of your feet because that's kind of self-effacing. So you just want to develop some wings so you can fly up. So that's the whole leveling up. That's where we get our name from. And we want to turn the race to zero carbon into a national pastime. And really think about what that means, a national pastime where people are engrossed and really tracking and following this game because it's interesting and they want to see who wins it. So it's like taking your cool cities challenge and really emphasizing that challenge part of it. Like, okay, who's going to do it first? Like we want to speed it up by 2040, but you know what? I'm going to get there, or 2030, I'm going to get there 2029, like let's get that competitive spirit going. And then our goal is to coach each state to win. So how do we do that? One of our big things is, and I feel that it's shared here. I mean, if you're saying, let's get to 2030, you're not even talking about, is climate change real or not? Do we have to explain the science to anybody? No, we're past that. We're like, okay, how are we going to do it? It's not like science communication, it's solution negotiation. It's agreeing on which plays to execute. So that's where we're at, and that's the mindset part. Okay, so, and a shout out to our collaborators who got me the invite here, yay! So we just got this grant from Constellation Energy to educate, thanks to Michelle Joseph and the Student Global Ambassadors Program, awesome program, and in collaboration with Catholic University of America. So we're doing workshops, as we're doing a couple of sets of workshops for students, and we're actually looking for more students. If you have any schools that you want to get involved in our program, we're going to be workshopping some of this material and go into much greater depth. I'm going to kind of just do an overview here because I only have 20 minutes, but if you can imagine, it would be fun. So that's awesome. Now about this document, I'm not doing a PowerPoint. This is CODA, and it's a very interesting thing that I just stumbled on recently, but they have this philosophy that, you know, a document is kind of some kind of shared truth. And if we're going about to make a, you know, a playbook or a scoreboard, and that we want it to be easily, you know, copied into templates for other people to then play around with and do their own thing with, this seems like a great thing to use. And it's got a lot under the hood, which I just barely touch on here, which is too bad, but it's a very interesting technology. All right, so that's the intro. And our mission is, you know, we're going to introduce the rules of the race, the framework. It's a sports metaphor, players, teams, fields. We're especially going to get into the metrics, because that's one thing that if you want to play a game, you have to agree on the rules of the game and the metrics. So that's like serious. And then surfacing conflicts and gaps, because I think that's what happens is somebody in the questions mentioned greenwishing. So that's where, you know, we have to surface those issues and really see if we can meet those gaps as we scale. And then it's a call to action for reconciliation and normalization of the metrics. So that's our big thing. So those two things right now, keep in mind, if you want to join us and work out and grapple, a lot of the numbers I'm going to use right now aren't final numbers. They're like estimates, back of the envelope. We're not even sure, because there's so many numbers floating around. It's like, which ones do you use and do they make sense? So, you know, we adopt that, join the competition committee, because if you think we want to make a national pastime, am I talking too fast? Hello, deep breath. I do that sometimes.
You're excited. That's okay. We understand.
I had to catch a breath. Yes, if we truly want to turn this into a national pastime, if you think the NFL, you know, they've got a competition committee and then they've got the commissioner, right? So our organization is just trying to pull other organizations together to join this committee, and then there'll be a commissioner and it'll be very formalized. So formalizing the race is a real goal, and we're looking for people to get involved who, you know, want to do that with us. And also don't forget to sign up your schools for the Constellation Workshop. Okay, so that's the intro. Yay! Okay, so now let's get to the talk, the meat. Okay, it seems really simple. This is all I'm going to talk about. We want to go from climate crisis to national pastime. Who are we? Who's playing? What are the fields in place? And then those metrics. Okay, seems really simple. All right, let's dive in. Okay, climate crisis. Okay, so what is this climate crisis? Here's the situation. We're in a world where Team Doom is dancing in civilization's end zone and Team Earth is playing out the clock, right? And we don't know if we have what it takes to get to zero carbon victory. We have no idea, honestly. Does anybody here really know? We don't know. I don't know. Okay, so now football is an excellent metaphor for this. I don't know, maybe a lot of people here don't like football. I don't actually watch football. I just think it's a great metaphor for this. I'm like, football, whatever. But it's such a great metaphor, as you'll see. So in football, you're going to run a ball down a field, right? And, you know, into the opposing team's end zone, and then you get it down, and the field's 100 yards long. But in the race to zero carbon, Team Earth has got to get the carbon emissions down to zero and sequester them in Team Doom's end zone, you know, and the whole planet is your field. And of course, Team Doom is going against you. They're putting the carbon in the atmo and messing everything up. Now, most of us, and this is a very important part of this, are playing for both teams. We're playing for them right now. We're playing with them at any given time. I've got the heater running, you know, it's cold. You know, I haven't switched to electricity. Like, I'm still playing. Okay, we got a long way to go to be like pure Team Earth players. So, and a lot of changes to make, and, you know, okay. So, and also, that's one important note. The second is that running carbon emissions down to zero is really abstract. You know, it's indirect. What are we actually supposed to be doing and measuring? So we keep coming back to that measurement because that's very important. Now, okay, so this is great for live because then I can see people raising their hands. You know, I like to say, okay, how do you feel right now? It's like a check in with your emotions. Do you feel that we can rally our fellow players on Team Earth to get this done in time, right? And we see there's no on this side and then there's yes. So how do we feel? I mean, if this was live, I'd just be like, get a show of sense. Okay, we got a thumb up there. But if you don't feel it's possible, then you might be kind of depressed, right? And that would be, if we can't do it, then we're going to grieve. You know, and so the stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We accept we can't do anything. Maybe we get happy about it. We decide we're going to go out in a blaze of glory. You know, we're like, so there's a lot of emotional stuff going on there. On the other hand, if we think, no, we're going to turn this around. This is a very different mindset. We're going to turn this around. It is very difficult though. So what do we have to do? And it's all these other fellow players who are just like slacking. What is their problem? So what we have to do is now we're into a different thing, the stages of team building. So the stages of team building, you form. It's like, hey, by the way, everybody on this call is in the team, whether, you know, a bunch of people outside, like we're all on this team, we're all Team Earth, and we're all doing different things. The next thing is storming. We try to figure out what we're doing together and how we're doing it. So that kind of correlates to the bargaining phase, the bargaining and the storming. And a lot of people, they think like if they're talking in like, oh, it's climate denial, they're confusing the storming with the denial. That happens a lot. It's like, no, we don't like your solution or something. And then norming is when you figure out, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then performing is you do it. And then if you succeed, you adjourn. Or if you fail, then you go back to brief. There's no guarantees. I'm so sorry. You know, this is why sports are exciting, because you don't know how it's going to end. Okay, so this is what we're going through. This is what we're doing right now in this world. We got to do this or just give up. I don't know. But okay, so that's where we're at. So this is where coaching comes in, because we got to build these teams. So let's go. Now, leveraging national pastime technology. We have, in terms of creating culture, one of the things they talk about is code switching. So if you want to just get somebody to switch from one code or, you know, adopt a thing. And so this is why, sorry, that keeps coming out there. This is why I really like the football thing, because so many Americans totally understand it. Not all of them, but enough that it would be okay. So how did the NFL make a national pastime out of just like running a ball down a field, right? It's like a really silly game. I mean, think about it. But they're very deliberate. This did not happen by accident. There's like tons of thought into like making the game legible for people. So they have the super slow-mo camera, like the sky cam. I mean, they have so much going on to make it super legible. They magnify the game. They go, you know, they embrace every technology that can magnify it, and they keep score. They show you the giant jumbotron score every second, the score on the players, you know, like how many passes, how many plays, how many incompletes. I mean, they really break everything down. They like super obsessive over these details. And then the repetition and the clarification, right? And then refreshments. There's a lot of beer. So so we want to leverage that kind of technology. Okay, so the rules. Oh yes, we've got to have some rules. In the race to zero carbon, the first US state to achieve a net zero carbon economy with the best quality of life, very important to put that in, wins. Okay. And then what do we win? Besides the intrinsic stuff, there's a carbon cup. This is not the actual carbon cup, but each state is going to donate a diamond. And the diamond is because it's sequestered carbon. See, so then once we get them, we just stick it onto the cup, and then the state that crosses the line first gets the cup. Okay. Plus, there may be other prizes. We don't know. So join the prize committee to help make that happen. Now, countries can also compete. So I said US state because I'm in America. I'm also Iranian American. So actually, you know, I'm playing for two countries. I want Iran to get, and also probably because I'm Iranian American, I'm kind of more embrace the conflict situation. I don't know. So people like avoid conflict. I'm like, well, there's conflict. Let's deal with it. But countries can compete. And then this is really important. I'm going to use this. We also, just like the NFL develops a shorthand, they have a lot of shorthand. So just as the back of my business card, and it's a really easy way to show the shorthand. And like I say, we're developing shorthand, so this may or may not work, but this is a proto shorthand. So here is the US compared to Costa Rica, but this is the US's energy supply field. And we are at this line is the DLOS here, the decarbonized line of scrimmage. So here is the decarbonized stuff. You got your, I don't know, solar, wind, hydro, nuclear. And then this is biomass, which apparently there's now a debate. Like, I think the decarbonized line is supposed to go back a little bit further. Anyway, this is gas, oil, and coal. So the shorthand is, here's the US flag. EPP is emissions per person, which was 15 metric tons. I don't know if this is the final number or whose estimate. That's really important to nail down. DLOS 8F, so 80% fossil, 2Z, 20% zero carbon. EO is electricity only. And I point this out because so many people, they say, oh, we're going to decarbonize. Oh, we're like 70% decarbonized. It's like, oh, electricity only. So it's 70% of 30%, or, you know, you're not, you're still at the 80-yard line. So, and that frustrates me, but it's one of those things. But of the electricity only, we're 60% fossil, 20% nuclear, so 2N, 10% hydro, 10% wind, right? And I'm rounding it, obviously, there's like some solar there too. So, and then the quality of life, how do we measure that? It's really important because people could get to zero by being totally horrible to their citizens. We don't want that. Okay, so, and then Costa Rica, and I put Costa Rica on purpose because, well, first of all, they have a much lower emissions per person, 1.7 metric tons. But their decarbonized line of scrimmage is actually 70% fossil, 30% zero carbon. You see a lot of reports are like, oh, they're almost 100% you know, renewable. No, that's their electricity only. So of that 30%, 80% is hydro, 10% geothermal, 10% wind. And I think this makes it much clearer, like where they're at, what's going on, and what they're doing. Because you see that even though they're 70% fossil, they're still much lower in emissions. So that means they must be using a lot less energy. Now, then, if this is a you know, tournament among different countries, like they're in a different class. Maybe they have better weather. They don't need heating. They don't need cooling. They have an advantage. So we have to like work that in. But these are some of the metrics that if we want to turn this into a national pastime, you know, we need to adopt this. This is kind of critical to, so that everybody's on the same page and they can really compare apples to apples and understand, just like you would in football, like why this player has an advantage and stuff like that. Hey, excuse me. All right. Do I have time? Have I run out of time? How am I doing? Okay, who?
Yep, you still have a couple minutes. Good job.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so who's playing the game? Well, there's teams, players, coaches, and referees. The team is, of course, your state is your team as a whole, and you're the player. Every person is a player, you know, we're citizen voter consumers. But between you and your whole state are specialized teams. That's your block, your neighborhood, your household, your city, your region, your school. So those are specialized teams. They have specialized plays, but all these plays have to add up. Okay, and as a player, and the beauty of this is just like with what David is doing, when you build community spirit and you build these teams, I think it's very important right now with our incredibly polarized country to build team spirit, and to build community spirit, to start getting people to identify with their location and their space, and you know, really getting to learn their team and their state and their space, because a lot of these solutions are spatially located and relevant. So you're the player, the power comes from you. There's a narrative out there, no, the power isn't from you. Corporations are trying to tell you it's all on you. You have this, you know, it's not you. It kind of goes both ways. Like they're also trying to deflect and say, no, we don't have power, it's you. And you're trying to say, no, we don't have power, it's you. But there's a feedback loop. And the corporate guy is also a player. You know, the politician is a player. We're all players, and we all have power. But what happens is our powers clash against each other. So we cancel each other out. So the real power, you have power, but the effectiveness comes from your power and how well your plays are chosen, what plays you chose, and the quality of the teamwork, right? So that's what that's about. All right, and then coaches obviously need to really understand the game well, because players don't want to take all the time to learn everything. So it's really there, we need a coaching class that can really figure out stuff and how to help people. And our thing is, well, this, like a sport, we've got a coach's pledge, which includes the promise to uphold the players' rights. Let me see if I can go to that. But the players' rights is kind of important. I got this from something that had coaches, you know, for little league teams, because the coaches were starting to get kind of mean and, you know, just, they were thinking more about themselves, or certain parents were becoming overbearing. And it was like, how do you really support the player in this game to really do the play that's right for them? And especially in our country, it's so polarized. So it's like the right to participate and in a level determined to match your commitment and political economic orientation, right? It's transpartisan. So we're playing around with this. These are, again, other things to look at. Yeah, and just, but remember, the player's problem is poor teamwork, solution confusion, and unresolved conflict. Okay, and there's red flags, which, as somebody was saying, was that green wishing, but also greenwashing and so on. So, and now the very important thing is the referee. So this is where we need the experts, and I love experts, and I've just been going through so many of these playbooks, which are like energy master plans from different states, which are like 10,000 pages long. And it's like, can you guys just clarify this game for everybody to play? Like the NFL would not give you a 2,000 page thing. They would be like, here, is this how it plays? And let's make a, you know. So the referees officiate the race. So they're the final arbiters of metrics. And we need them to normalize and reconcile confusing metrics. So that is my ask. And I don't know, it's already 7:45, but I don't know if we have time, but I do want to have another meeting with people to really discuss this, like what I'm talking about.
It really, you are, time is getting close, and I do want to make sure you get to the metrics, because I think that's one of the keys, that normalization of what we're measuring, so that we're all sort of talking on the same book.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's so important.
Okay, so I'll try to blaze through this. Okay, so first of all, for metrics, the metrics match the play or the field, right? And there's key types of plays. There's demand side plays where you want to electrify, you know, or go for efficiency or reducing. And then supply side where you got to swap out fossil for zero carbon energy. And then there's meta plays. Now, this is where the quality of life stuff comes in. You know, you want to transform your community. You want to just, you know, get finance plays, legal plays. You want to contiguous gardens. So all of these have to be measured in some way. I mean, if you go, let's electrify cars, you know, how many of the cars should we electrify? How many should we just swap out for electric bikes? You know, you want to start seeing the end game. So our goal is to start getting people to get better at seeing the end game as well as the steps up to that end game. And so, yeah, so the household field has a lot of things where you can start seeing the field and seeing the different plays. And I want to just point out here. So up here, we said there's demand side, supply side, and meta. So here, the demand side is you know, your electric clothes dryer, and you switch out your electrify your vehicle. Supply side is you add solar panels. And so like one way to measure the metrics is like, well, how many people have gotten electric vehicles? How many people, instead of getting electric vehicles, have we invested in transport? Which players benefited most? You start looking at your players, and that's the justice kind of side of it. The rooftop panels, how many houses are suitable for rooftop? How many, you know, what is our maximum solar rooftop? How much energy do we get from that? And then what's the gap? What else do we need to do besides that? Like, that's one of the like simple, like, please quantify that, people. And then this play, purchase renewable energy. This is not an energy supply side play. It's a meta play. It's a purchase. So it's a finance play. To qualify as an energy supply side, you actually have to put new energy on the ground. That's my distinction. It's really important because a lot of people do play. There's like corporations which are like, oh yes, we're carbon neutral because we purchased credits and we sold off a thing. And it's like they have done absolutely nothing to change anything. So we want to, you know, there's where's the ref? He's going to give a yellow card for that. And so anyway, so the griddle, the griddle is great because we have to flatten the curve. And a lot of people need to understand the importance of this play, but it also measures how much energy you're using every day. And so, oh, did I even mention that? Oh, shoot. Oh, yes. No. Okay. So in the field of meat, we'll get the field of meat is, remember that senator who was like, the Green New Deal, they want you to get rid of all the meat. Here's before the meat and here's after with the Green New Deal. So people mocked this whole thing, but I actually love it. It's like the field of like, how much meat do we want to get rid of? And like, let each cow represent, you know, 10, you know, I don't know, 10,000. Anyway, there's room to play around with there. And finally, a very important field is the landscape. So a lot of people just somehow dismiss like, oh yeah, we'll put some panels somewhere. And then it's like, well, we'll put it, but just not in our backyard. We'll put it somewhere else. So it becomes energy colonizing. And then we all have this fantasy that like somewhere in Nevada or Texas, they're going to take all of our stuff. So this is one of those impending conflicts that we really need to front load and get clear on. And so each community does need to kind of figure out like, well, how far are they prepared to go with energy infrastructure? And if you haven't resolved that conflict, you know, you're not going anywhere. So okay, metrics. Which state is in the lead? Guess. Type in your guesses. I don't know. Let's see. Everybody type in a word. We'll get to it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, type. Okay, and the answer is New York. Yeah, you got it. All right. So New York, actually, this is a dated, this is like old, and the EIA, which I get this from, is like the most recent is 2018. So it could totally not be New York right now. And that's another pain point. It's like, guys, we want to have a scoreboard, and your scoreboard is 30, you know, there's serious lag time. What is wrong with you? And just the EIA. I've actually been on the phone with these EIA people. They're like, well, you need an act of Congress. I mean, okay. So, and notice we use emissions per person. This is really important because otherwise Texas would be the worst, but they have like 30 million people. So that's not fair. And you don't want to just say, well, the state that has the fewest people wins, because then it's like, oh, the way we win is by killing people. I mean, where are you going with that? So that's horrible. So we want emissions per person. It's how well a state meets the needs of its citizens with a zero carbon footprint. That's your, you know, you want quality, and yeah, so it's not how many people, it's how well you do it. Okay, and then the first gigawatt down. I hope you guys have watched my video. If you haven't, it was in the thing, but that explains it much better. But the point is, so if we drill down, but when we make this app, which we're making on this thing, you're going to be able to click on your state, and then you're going to see your energy supply field, which also will have to be translated to demand side, because it's pretty like the motor gas is cars. So this is your car play. And this is in fossil fuel. So you need a conversion factor. Like, well, if we were to electrify it, how much energy electric supply would we need? And, you know, jet fuel, well, are you going to eliminate flying? If you don't, then you need to, that's the one area where you might need to do offsets. And then natural gas is part heating and part electricity. So so this thing, so you got to figure out how much. So we are decarbonized. This is New Jersey, so we're at the 20% decarbonized line, maybe 18%, and we want to go all the way. So we have to electrify on the one side, but that's what all the communities are working on. Like, swap this out, swap that out, and then you got to go, okay, so how much energy do we need? What is our number? That's the number I want every state to know and be able to say, like, right up front on the top of your thing. If you electrify everything, this is how much energy you're going to need. And that'll motivate people, like, whoa, that's a lot. Let's really try much harder on our whatever. But then how to calculate this? So New Jersey nuclear we have 3 nuclear power plants. They are each about a gigawatt of delivered energy. It's like 1.2 gigawatts. So this is 3 gigawatts. And so that would mean that the whole field is about 18 to 20 gigawatts long, right? And you've already got 3 down, so you need another like 16, 17 gigawatts. So, and then, so if you could get that all by nuclear, if you had a bunch of people, oh, that's where I was here. No plays without a player. I'm sorry. But anyway, that's the philosophy. You're only going to get something done if there's somebody who wants to do it. So, but if you don't want to do nuclear, then it's like, well, how much other land are you going to need? How many wind turbines? Do you have enough space for that? How far can you go with that? Do you have the permits? And the sooner we front load this conversation, because it's a very touchy conversation. It's one of those sweaty, awkward things that nobody wants to talk about. But like, I'm a coach, I'm looking at the players, I'm like, guys, you have to talk about this. You have to talk about this. There's like, what are you going to do? So we want each community to put maps up, like each county, of like where they're going to go, start bidding, and start seeing how far they're ready to go. And it's really important because, like I said, it's a solution negotiation. And so in negotiation, one of the key things is the anchor. You've got to anchor. And right now we've got anchoring backwards. Nobody is anchoring. They're like, well, we'll do 2%, or well, we'll just, you know, what's the least I can do? It's like, yeah, no, guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? Yeah, so again, so demand side, reduce and electrify, supply side, swap out the fossils for your zero carbon energy, but know how much. We want to know the end game we want that number. So we're looking, so that was my call to action. Who wants to join me in getting people to step up and get those numbers in each of their state and get it like to be the practice, the norm. We want a norm. This is like storming, just what is that number? Like however you want to meet that. And for example, like the state of New Jersey in their energy master plan, they do have like, oh, here's what we can do for 100% clean energy. But again, they don't, it's 100% of what? Like, can you, nowhere in the master plan did they say of what, but they have the information somehow, but they just don't. And so again, it's like we see they're obviously not going to touch the nuclear. They're going to leave that there. They're like, yikes. And then, you know, solar, offshore wind. And then this is interesting, out of state solar and out of state wind. And I think every state is doing this. So there's one state It's going to have all of the out-of-state stuff. We don't know who that state is, that lucky state. Now, also, I told you that I estimated, like, it's based on my extrapolation from nuclear, that it's a 18 to 20 gigawatt state. But you know, the Solutions Project with Mark Jacobson, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I drilled down and I found, again, hidden away. He's wonderful. He's actually put numbers for every single state. So he's got New Jersey, and his estimate is really, it's more of a 32 gigawatt state. And then he puts down, like, well, and you're going to need this much onshore wind. And so you're going to need 85 new onshore wind turbines, 9,000 offshore, you know, and of course this was 5 megawatts, but now there's 6 megawatts. So you're only going to need 7,000. We can start playing around. But now we've anchored some numbers. So he's done a great service. We've anchored numbers. And now, like, we could check this now with our energy master plan. We can get those numbers, and we need to get them. And, like, he's got the numbers for Maryland too, if you're interested. He says it's a 20 gigawatt state, but if you know, it might be less, it might be more. I don't know. We should know. That's what part of the reconciling the numbers is very important. You can't play a sport if you're just running and you have no idea how long the field is and who's going to do what. So anyway, it's, you know, we're going from the spreadsheet to the ground game, and there's the NIMBY coefficient. So where, you know, NIMBY, I mean, that's the name of the game. Like how much area do you need? When are you going to reach NIMBY parity? Will you get enough solar down before, like, they're equally bad with, you know, so these are the questions that we must ponder. And
that was good questions. That was really good. You covered quite a lot.
But wait, there's more. I just want to tell you how awesome Coda is, because, like, I took this. Like, you can actually, I finally figured out how to pull this out and start a scoreboard. Oh, it's not showing up. How dismal. Oh, yes, there it is. So yeah, so using what Sustainable Jersey has, this great resource center with data. So there's a lot of people doing great stuff that we can draw from. And Sustainable Jersey is great. They've actually, it's kind of like the Cool City block, but they, you know, they help each New Jersey city. And so it looks like our electricity use is 7.93 gigawatts. And so cities are at the megawatt year level. So you know, and the states are at gigawatt year level. All right, so anyway, I'm gonna just stop right there. Hello.
That was great. I mean, you really did cover quite a lot. I'm seriously impressed that you got so much of that in there. We have time for one question. I'm sorry. And I think, ladies, let me see. I think the first to come in. What was that? I guess, is that Jim or Thomas? Thomas, you asked if you, Rezwan, had thought about creating a game, an actual game video board that people can play based on this, since you're a game designer.
Actually, there are several really good ones out there. One is called Energetic, and so City Atlas has designed it, and it's really good. And there's another one coming out called Daybreak. So they're out there. We've used those as tools to help people understand the things. But what we're doing is a real world game, and the points are real. And, you know, it's not like the game, the simulations can help you think it through. But this is it. Like, if we don't get to zero carbon, we don't get to zero carbon. Like, did you get the power plant on the ground? Did you really reduce your efficiency so you didn't need to get the power plant on the ground? Like, do you have your numbers added up? Like, there's no way around that. It's a real world pastime.
Very good. Thank you guys so much for really giving us some I think some interesting things to look at. I think what's most important is much of what both you guys are talking about is sort of that grassroots, that we're all sort of the players. I do like the football. I am a big football fan, I have to admit. You know, but we are all players sort of in a Team Earth. Go Team Earth. Let's see if we can't, you know, defeat Team Doom in time. This has been a great evening. I do have a couple of things to end on, to make sure to tell you that we are going to have a couple of more eco evenings coming up in February the 21st. It's environmental justice. March 30th, it's electrification. And in April, following Earth Month, we will be talking about Earth Month type activities, which follows pretty closely after the Green Fest, where we hope we will be in person on April 23rd at Brookside Gardens. I want to thank you guys all for joining us tonight. When you get your synopsis and video of this, you will also get a question, a survey question. I would love your input on other topics that we might cover through these eco evenings. It's always been a plan of ours that we would actually do one of these in person, physically. So, I mean, think of that as a goal, probably the fall now, but we would love to be able to see you, as Rezwan mentioned, to actually see faces or feet, legs, you know, all beyond our heads. We look forward to that, but please take a moment to fill out the survey. Just give us some suggestions, some thoughts on what you'd like these topics to be. It's important to us that we are listening to the audience and trying to bring experts, environmentalists, whatever, to answer any questions that you might have. That's it for me. We do have, oh, we're a little over. I don't know if anybody had any announcements. I want to give you an opportunity. Thank you so much for putting in the chat some of the other initiatives you know about. Is there anything real quick that anybody wanted to say? I'm going to give you a minute or so. I don't see any hands. Oop, I see Steve Whelan. Steve, what you got? Oh, you were just clapping. Thank you. Okay, I love it. That was good. All right, no questions. Anything in there? Thank you guys
Hey,
so much.
This
Oh,
is
wait,
this
I
is
hear it.
Jim. Oh, just
Jim.
to tell you, I put in the chat, if anyone wants to continue this discussion, I put a link into our ecosystem study group where we had planned to meet after this to talk about this more.
Oh, great, great. Did you put that in the chat?
I did, yes, thanks.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Anything else before oh, Louise, did you have one? Oh, yay.
Hi there. Tomorrow evening, Biodiversity for Livable Climate is hosting an event called Arctic Meltdown, and it starts at 6:30. Philip, help me out.
Can you put it in the chat, the link? She said,
Yes,
he said,
chat.
is that 6? That looked like 6. Okay. Doug, did you have one? Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. This was another successful eco evening. You will all get, if not tomorrow, the next day, a link to this. Please share it. For those of you who didn't get a chance to attend live, you'll also get the link. We believe everybody should be able to see what was going on. I want to thank you again, and I will see you next month. Thank you.